My name is Lamar Marshall. I'm from Alabama. In 1991, I founded a group that became Wild South. I won't spend a lot of time on the background, but because of some issues on public lands where cultural resources were being destroyed, there was an issue of a big clear cut that destroyed a place called Indian Tomb Hollow. Local Native Americans were outraged, went to the Forest Service, and the Forest Service said, the district ranger said, "You got toilet paper and a good road in there, what's the problem?" And so they founded this group and got an Apache Indian to create some endangered species necklaces and raised $10,000 and began an era of 10 years of litigation, which culminated with a regional office in Atlanta sending people to the third world country of Alabama saying, "What's going on down here?" After a big Native American protest, determined that they were violating the National Historic Preservation Act and shut down 18,000 acres of the forest and forced them to do cultural protection. And that led me through Alabama and then 3 years ago into the mountains up here. So my purpose in life is to preserve cultural resources in the mountains and on public lands. So the project I'm doing was funded by the Cherokee Preservation Foundation. Funded us for 2 years till now, and then I've got another grant to map Cherokee trails on Qualla boundary the next year. And of course I work with cousins, Russell Townsend, Tyler Howe. In fact, they helped me get this project rolling. A lot of the basic research that got me going was what Brett Riggs has already done, and our other top archaeologists and people that mapped out the Trail of Tears. My project is more broad in that we're trying to get compilation of primary sources of where Cherokee trails were, get out on the ground, find out if they're under a paved road, abandoned in the woods, if they're on public lands or private lands. And so you can see the extensive network that's starting to evolve all over western North Carolina, and you can basically say that our entire modern transportation system is laid down on top of a Cherokee trail system that not only ran throughout the Appalachian Mountains, but also connected the Atlantic to the Pacific, the Hudson Bay to the Gulf of Mexico. Very extensive, and trade going on for thousands of years. So what really took place was that when the Europeans came, they didn't come into this new world, they came to an old world. It was already well established. And I'm going to go, if I go too fast, let me know, because there's a lot, I have too many slides in my presentation for 30 minutes. And like I said, we're getting out in the mountains. I went up to Indian Gap and walked off near Newfound Gap, straight off the mountains towards Cherokee, crawled through laurel thickets, following the old Cherokee path that became a turnpike in the early 1800s. I've been in bears, stinging nettle, yellow jackets, snakes, anything you can think of, we encounter out in the forest. Back in Alabama, we mapped the Black Warriors path. It was a famous creek path that Davy Crockett walked down right beside where my wife is standing there. And that's a documented trail through Alabama. And of course, when you start thinking about the evolution of trails, of course, many of them were buffalo trails and animal trails, and then the Native Americans that lived in the mountains created paths and trails, and they followed the path of least resistance many times, and then many times they deviated to connect to sacred places or hunting grounds, and etc. Dividing ridges were one of the most used natural features, aside from valleys, because you could, obviously, if you were going to go from point A here to point B, and you could follow this river, you're going to cross multitudes of deep, wet, cold streams, laurel thickets. But if you got on the watershed divide, then you could be following along. It might be a little longer, but it might be faster and easier to travel. Fords and shallow places in the rivers. The Cherokee Mountains at one time the mountains were barriers to these fertile valleys where the Cherokees lived in their villages. And they were basically isolated from the rest of the Native American world, and especially from the Europeans when they came in. When trade began, which was the beginning of the end for all free Native American tribes and peoples because of the economic system, traders came in, and then these little trails that were described as being so narrow over the mountain passes that the horses, if you met somebody, the horses would rub their hair off of each other because the pass was so narrow. Let's see, William Gerard de Brom wrote about this, and he wrote about the American Canaan. So we find that a lot of the early pioneers that came in here thought this was a Canaan, and they were sent by God to clean out Canaan and get rid of the Philistines and the savage heathen that lived here. And in my opinion, the Native Americans were the freest people on earth at that time. They were totally self-sufficient. And look at us today. We're all corporate slaves, got to get up and go to work every day, and then now we're worrying about the economic collapse around the world. And the so-called civilized peoples have developed nuclear weapons that they can blow the whole planet up. So it's really a good debate on who the real savage was. So, mountain gaps, I'm just kind of going on, you can read. The Appalachian Mountains were called the Cherokee Mountains around 1700 and before. Vast mountains. There's a 1747 Bowen Mount and Cherokee Mountains. So my presentation is basically about if you're researching the Trail of Tears, if you're researching any trail, or if you're researching your family genealogy, you can use these resources to do that research with. And basically, historical maps, early surveys, journals, and diaries are especially useful. I stole that from Brett Riggs. Don't tell him. That's kind of a painting, maybe or maybe not. Tyler, does that look like what a Cherokee?
A little bit.
A little bit like it.
Yeah.
I don't picture exactly like that, but somewhat. So in doing this project, I've met with Cherokee elders. I've traveled back in the Smoky Mountains to sacred places, and I've got interns. And the focus of this project, though, being funded by the foundation, was, hey, get the Cherokee youth involved, get them out on the ground, teach them how to use the GPS, take them on their ancient trails. So that's what I do. I try to inspire younger people to get out there and teach them about Cherokee geography. Let's get a map made that has all the ancient Cherokee names on it, across the mountains, the streams, the mountains, and recover. You'll be surprised when you're reading an 1820 early survey record, like you'll find a name like on the Chattooga River, Telecanoke River. Wow, we just found an ancient name that's been lost. We go to the tribe, to Tom Belcher, one of the tribal linguists, and he says, gosh, this means where the bushes hang over the water. Or Catucci up near Cowee, 1761 map names this mountain, C-A-T-O-U-C-H-E. I met a Cherokee last week. Name is Cotsie, the way you pronounce the name. It's spelled the same. I said, what does your name mean? He said, it means up there on the mountains. Well, Tom Belcher had already said, hey, this name, 1761, means walking along the top of the mountains. So I thought that was amazing. It's kind of a cheesy map I made there, but I was playing with Photoshop, didn't have a lot of time, but I was speaking at Robbinsville, showing them how the network of trails connected and spread out across the mountains in some of the towns. And one of the famous paths from Robbinsville or Chioa up the Chioa River went to the Overhill towns, it's particularly Tallahassee town. And so I found the old trail, even found what appears to be a trail marker right on the trail, and that is definitely the Chioa Trail. It's near Yellowhammer Gap, between Topoka and Yellowhammer Gap, and then the trail extended on to the on farther. Now, back to cultural preservation. Robbie Snedeker is a wonderful Forest Service employee in North Carolina, and he wants to see cultural resources protected. And so he said, if you'll submit all the maps with all the trails that you found to my office, we will see they get protected. And not only that, but probably designated as required. The National Historic Preservation Act requires that any old trail on public lands at least be protected until it's studied for its significance and possible adding to the National Register of Historic Places. So I've submitted a draft about 153 miles. Let me get this, see a little better here. The green is national forest, the white is private land, so you see there's a lot of private lands that can be protected, probably under modern roads anyway in some cases. The gold are places where these old trails cross the national forest. And that's what I want to see. Some of them be designated as walking trails where Cherokee youth or anybody can go walk. Cherokee runners might could find a mountain trail they could run as they did in the old days. And they communicated that way. Many of the early documents talk about how the Cherokees sent a runner out. Before an army could get into Cherokee Nation, every Cherokee for 300 miles would know it before they even got started. And what I'm doing is pulling out, to prove there was a trail from point A to point B or town to town, I take the early historical maps. Now, I do photoshopping and published a magazine for years, so I do a lot of graphic work. I can put out these little pieces, for example, Hiawassee, Wanasee, and all this is over around Hayesville to Murphy. There was a major trail as early as 1755, and it was way earlier than that. And you can see it crossing over the mountains to Canuka. It says Kenosha, that's Canuka, which is a town 2 miles from Niquossee at Franklin. There's a mound there. And this trading path connected there way, way, way back. And as far as figuring out a way to classify these trails, I had to come up with a way to number them. The only thing we have was about 1920, a man named Myers did a report on the southeastern Indian trails, and he numbered these very general routes and trails. So I treat them as complexes. You got a trunk trail up the main river, maybe, or part of a trading path that's a famous, well-used path. Then you got these collateral trails or smaller trails that drop in, as Mortar described them. Collateral trails dropping in, going everywhere. But the mountains were full of trails. They will never recover the lost trails. This is a Brett Riggs discovery, I guess. The 1837, the Army sent in a reconnaissance team to map the Cherokee Nation for removal. And they wanted to know where every trail and road was because they wanted to, number one, widen some roads for wagons so they could get the Cherokees out. And number two, if a war broke out, they wanted to know where the trails were so they could take on the Cherokees. They were so devious that Tyler and I were reading the letters of this association of this mission. Said, we need to go in and buy all the corn from the Cherokees at any price so that if they resist, they won't have any food. It was bad. And you can see Tatum's Gap on here, the old Army Road from Fort, we're going over here today, Fort Delaney and Andrews, across Tatum's Gap. And then you can see the numbering that I'm slide that's up there. You can see the crossroads of trails and the detail that they did in 1837-38 on these maps. Now, associated with these maps are 10 field books, about 10 field books. They get down into the surveying part, which is one reason I'm here today. It was I worked for engineering companies and surveying companies and learned how to survey before I learned how to do this work. And Brett will recognize this as the Town Gap Trail road that, of course, he documented and mapped. I just gave you credit. Did I not give him credit for the discovery of the Army map and the field books?
Very good, Lamar.
As I do, I get brownie points. I do Photoshop too. I publish magazines, so I dropped in the wagon and the Cherokees and stole the Cherokee faces from Brett's kiosk and made my own little portion of that. So, and we just saw the shots of the Cowee Trail from Yellowhammer Gap is over here with the trail tree on it. So what I've done is taken a lot of these trails and compiling them into a master map, which will go, now this work goes to Tyler's office, and they just determine what is sensitive, not sensitive. And these type of things here will not go out to the public. These are sensitive, and you'd have every pot hunter in the world out there with a metal detector digging up people's yards if they could get hold of that. But you can see the detail of the surveys of the houses and the fields and the trails. And so I've taken since I surveyed, I take the survey notes and try to recreate and figure out where the trails are, at least as close as I can. So that's along the Chill River. And then the big map out there is got lots of layers in it that don't show up on the map where I printed it out. And this is kind of, I use these when I speak at the Cherokee classrooms and to show them where the trails were. The Iona or Yomakanara Road was a famous 1761 maps. When the British came in, you'll find that listed, and it ran from Jory, as Bartram says, through Burlington Gap, intersects a trail that's noted in the 1837 field books as a Burlington path by Williams surveyors, and that it establishes these points where I can have primary evidence that the trail was here and was here and was here. And there's you call Brett talking about the reservations yesterday. These are some of the reservations around Cowee where I live. I live on John Pitch's reservation, and how the trails connected. One of the great finds that I found was a trail. I found an 1810 reference that said traveling up the trail from Webster to Franklin, that there was a fork at Greens Creek. The Watauga Trail going over to Watauga, and then the Cowee Trail going up Greens Creek. So I went over Greens Gap and connected to Cowee here. Of course, there's the mound that is preserved by the Cherokees. A lot of trails went over the escarpment. Highlands, the Walking Stick Trail, I documented it from the 1820 Love Survey, found where the surveyor started on a path on Big Creek, which established that was a Cherokee trail there. We have tracked Andre Michaud's route up over the plateau, found a Cherokee hunting camp up here with a 1888, 1889. There was a bark structure with the racks and the remains of animals where they had hunted and killed it. These high ridges and plateaus were primarily hunting grounds for the Cherokees. It's where they hunted bear. It wasn't a good place to grow corn or live, and they just didn't live that much. Some of the trails that I've mapped out around the Cacher's Highlands area, because I've been speaking to some of the groups up there, are starting to pop out over there. Raven Gap is one of the most famous crossing places of the Blue Ridge. Old Fort, when Rutherford came in, went up Swannanoa Gap, and then you got Hickory Nut Gap. You got several gaps down the Blue Ridge, including Cacher's, which was a major gap that William Holland Thomas traveled up the Tuckasegee River, over Cacher's Valley and down to Pickens, South Carolina, in his journals. The Raven Gap was a very easy route, and the reason it was easy for armies to come in. 1760, when Montgomery came in, and the entire British Empire was embarrassed highly when Montgomery got attacked by Cherokees near Otto, and had 20 men shot dead and 80 men wounded. Had to retreat back to South Carolina. He had 1,500 men with him. Lieutenant Colonel James Grant was with him. Grant, Cherokees all they wanted to sue for peace. Grant said, "You're going to be punished." And he raised 2,500 men, got about 70 Indians, very smart, Stockbridges, Chickasaws, and Catawbas that did not like the Cherokees. Brought the army back, came up across Oconee Mountain, Earl's Ford, War Woman Creek, Tuckarachi Town was back in here, came to the dividings. This is where the Great Charlestown Trading Path came through, divided, one fork going around up to Hiawassee, Hayesville, Murphy area. Many trails radiated from this point. And then the trail through Raven Gap, up the Tennessee River, to the Franklin area. I won't spend a lot of time, I just talked about that. Some of the major trunk trails going up the Tuckasegee River. We discovered some early records that showed there was a town called Tillanoa Old Town on the upper Tuckasegee River around North Cacher's, a place called the Rock Bridge, called the White Oak Flats. But many of these early records tell about this town, but nobody knows where it's at. And I'm not sure I know where it's at, but it's up near Tennessee Lake and Rock Bridge. Primary tools I use in my research: historical maps, the early surveys, and the journals. Get a mapper. I've mapped out, detailed the Rutherford expedition, took all the known journals, and then I put them in parallel, like a parallel Bible, and then I go mile by mile. When they say it's 3 miles from this town to this town, I plot it out, and they could be more or less. And the town shifted up and down, so that from the 1760 61 wars, you'll find a shift in towns from up to the time of the Revolution. Historic maps. This is a 1761 James Grant map showing the detail around. There's a Cowee, Nicowassee, Franklin, and then Watauga, Aurora, and Cowee. And then Yosemite was across the river here. But these maps are very good because I pretty well condensed in my mind, at least, that Canuka shows up on lots of maps, and Williamson's army came through here Rutherford, when he came in 1776, he came to Nick Watson, and he was impatient. He wouldn't wait on William since he was behind schedule. Got lost, wandered around Skeena, went back, ended up at Cowee, and he's at this Indian town, and his own men, because they thought he was over in Hayesville area, came upon him and saw this big body of men, turned around and ran like cowards back to Franklin, said there's a large body of Indians over there, which turned out to be Rutherford himself. And that was kind of a funny thing, but the Army camped near Cowee, about a mile up against the mountain, and went over, not at Wallace Gap, like a lot of our literature says, but most likely at a Winding Stair Gap. You know, the road there is deeper than your head. So that's the 4 generations of maps I've considered to be most significant: the historical maps, and then the removal maps, and then the Civil War maps, because the road system had not changed a lot by the time of the Civil War. 1880s, the USGS does their first surveys, and you get a snapshot of our road system, eliminating all modern roads, which is great to use to compare to the Civil War roads and then the roads back at the time of removal or before. 1730s, a George Hunter map. I threw in the modern names. You can see how general they were, but they showed the towns. There's Andrews to Motley, Little Tellicote, more down the river really. But I was going to show you an example of some of the more important historical maps, which I've got hundreds of them. And especially, since you can do Photoshop, you can take these old maps and you can pull them out and zoom in. That's what I do, zoom in, prove there was a trail from point A to point B. And then I use these as a general way to start mapping. Rough country over around the Blue Ridge, but not near as rough as dropping off of Newfound Gap down to Cherokee. 1755 John Mitchell map is a great map that I got a lot of details off of. Miles about 300 megs. That's another shot of this map. Now, the fun part is taking these things where you got the Army maps showing the road from Franklin to Almond running down the Little Tennessee River, where the modern highway deviates away from the river. And when you get down in the Needmore tracks and series on the river, you find this old road still running upside the river, and that's the only road that's there. And it was the main highway from Franklin to Bryson City back in 1820. John Stewart map, another good map showing the 24 Mountains Pass Trail and the general trading routes along the towns. And the Mound map is a great map if you're looking at the lower towns, which is just south of Highlands. And I dropped in the modern names on there. Highlands, Cashiers. I'm going to go a little bit faster here because I want to show you a little bit more. Got any questions, we can deal with that later. Then the removal area maps, the towns and so forth. Sketch map, thank you, Brett. Sketch map, fabulous way to, at that time, you can see where the Army noted paths and differentiated between what they consider to be wagon roads and paths. Of course, the Army map is an incredible, huge map, the best map that was ever made of western North Carolina from the Nantahala Mountains over after 1820. The Indians had been removed over the mountain from Franklin and Macon County and Jackson County. There's where I live around Cowee. And so you can see the great little, showing the road systems around Fort Hembry and Spikebuck. And then the Burning Trail, this was great to find this reference to as I was going across the mountain. And I'm sure the professionals probably already done this a long time ago, but taking the Army map and taking the survey books and then putting each little plat on the map so that you can get a better picture of what's what. And then the maps kind of run out of the Native American era, Civil War. These are great maps to look at. And then the funny thing, 1865, when God's wrath came upon Georgia and sent William Tecumseh Sherman down to burn Atlanta for retribution to the Cherokees, in my opinion, only my opinion. The federal government had only these old 1838 maps to use. They hadn't mapped much in the South. So you see Buffalo Town still showing up 1865, and you can tell they copied the Army map. 1884 series maps. Not going to make it in historical records much, but even postal route maps are great to have to see the evolution. And then there's the, of course, 2 sessions. This makes it easier to see what was seeded when you look at the session maps. And then, of course, when you're plotting up the 1820 Love survey maps, you can see the bend in the river up here and then here. And so you can see where Big George was. PJ was talking about Big George's, with the same Big George that moved over the mountain, or went over the mountain. And when Brett was talking about Christie, there's the Christies live right up here on the Valley River. This is the 1837 Beaver survey, so I'm really skipping around. Hogback was an Indian lived up on the Nantahala River, and these 1837 survey plats talk about the burning on the Burningtown Trail, Nantahala Road. So that's, to me, that's like jewels. And then plotting up where the Indians lived around Robbinsville, Fort Montgomery being here, Robbinsville here, the Army Road, Cattle Gap Road. Let's see, Long Creek goes over to Tamale and Gallahada, Andrews. Beginning at the White, stand on the east side of a Big Creek small path, great primary source for the path. That's where I believe Tillanoa town was either under the lake here, over in near Cashiers, Rock Ridge here, or Tennessee Lake, because the White Oak Flats is such a well-known place. And then notice the 1820 Love survey showing Shawnee John living on Caney Fork, and I think I noted that people think that Tuckasegee Town was up at modern town Tuckasegee. That was actually Tennessee Old Town. Brett Riggs reservation study. Old Nanny took a reservation at Tennessee Old Town, Webster being the site of Tuckasegee Town, where the Army crossed with 16 acres of corn burned. And so we got all these surveys and the turnpike surveys, start putting it all together, and then finding the land records. 640 acres on both sides of the Tennessee River, including Tennessee or Sound Benstown, 1809. People were claiming lands all over the place. And then you get out in the field. Jerry Wolf, don't try to go out with him, though. He'll leave you behind. Started up the dang mountain so fast I couldn't even take notes. And showed us all on the trails from Cheryl's Cove over the mountain. This is a unique place right here. The Army, 1761, they sent a contingent over from Cowee town to Whittier, which was Sokoa town. It was the most brutal military marches you ever found recorded, going at night over those mountains. The Army was told by the Indians, said, this is a pretty good road. You can make it over there. We can surprise the Cherokees in Sokoa, surprise them dawn. Well, they marched that trail, and this is a piece of it on the at a Western Gap where the Cowee drainage is dropped into Conley Creek drainage. And we want that piece of trail preserved. And then there's some of the things you find around where the towns were. I remember every town and every site, every sacred place, every place was connected by a trail in those days. They didn't have helicopters. This is just a piece out of where I've laid out the various journals, so I can detail mile by mile trail. This is near Oconee Station, the old Charlestown trading path near Becky Lake. If you were going, this is where Bartram came through here, Montgomery came through here, Grant came through here, and tens of thousands of Cherokees for thousands of years, because that was the path that they had created. Here's Catucci, the name meant walking along the top of the mountains. The mentioned the Cherokee I just met named Catucci, Kasi. So I think you get the idea of duplicate sites. Another place where you can find this road in the old map was Bartram. I proved by the 1820 Raven County surveys that Bartram probably did not go to Martin Falls, as Francis Harper suggests or believed. He argued that there wasn't a road through from Clayton, Georgia to Earl's Ford, probably because it's full of cane or something. But the surveys proved that there was a road there, straight through the valley, and nobody in their right mind would detour up around Courthouse Gap, way out of the way, climbing way up on the mountain. Rutherford came into, well, we'll just look at the maps. I don't show this to the Cherokees, and I don't like to see all the towns being going up in flames, but Rutherford came in, and they burned all the towns down to Allijoy. We Cuyahoga and Niquosi, and then Rutherford gets lost. He goes over, never makes it much further than he didn't even get to Murphy. Williams, on the other hand, comes around, seasoned Indian fighters, went up Warrior Gap, fell into the trap that Rutherford was supposed to fall into. About 13 men buried under the road with no markers over there today. And then Williamson goes around, and he does more damage than Rutherford ever dreamed of doing. And some of the people that want to get the Rutherford trace designated, they never mention Williamson. So I'm kind of having odds with that. There's a piece of the old turnpike running up Highway 441. That was basically a Cherokee trail, and then became the first state road in the Western Turnpike. And that's about all the time we got time for. And I had mapped out where the Battle of, I believe the Battle of Black Hole. If you get on a website called Southern Campaigns, you'll find thousands of pension statements by soldiers that fought in this war. And you can Google them and type in like Cowee. You find dozens of them fought at the Battle of Horseshoe, Battle of the Horseshoe or the Black Hole. And it's up in here, the Cherokees had 600 Indians that basically dropped, hit Williamson's army. Williamson's army had swivel guns. They put out their swivel guns and drove the Cherokees back. I made it through the presentation. I can't believe it. Record time. So I was born in Detroit, raised in Alabama. I can talk fast and slow at the same time. So thank you. If anybody got any questions, you can ask Brett Riggs or Paul Webb or some of the people that know more.
Did have a question that's, if these trails have not been used for many years, why aren't they overgrown? There are trees growing and so forth.
Well, you say that the trees are growing in the trails?
No, it didn't appear to me that there were trees.
Oh, well, there's some places well, the Charlestown Train Pack, I think people have been going there with forerunners keeping it cleaned out. A lot of places it's encroached with laurel so thick you have to crawl through it. And then there are trees, huge trees growing in a lot of these old trails. But at the turn of the century, the logging that came in these mountains denuded the mountains. The railroads came in, logging equipment, and they just eradicated so much Cherokee Trail history that it's not funny. The Army Road that Brett and Lance mapped out in such detail over a Tandem Gap. When I tried to follow it, I went into what was an old clear cut, and I couldn't even crawl because it's summertime. I couldn't even find that they'd done so much damage. So that's the importance of identifying cultural resources that do exist and having them protected under cultural heritage prescriptions that have been produced by the Forest Service. So I got off a tangent there. Anybody else?
These surveys, like Love surveys and others, are those located in North Carolina or the National Archives?
Both. The North Carolina Archives has the Love survey books where you can go through and look at the plats. And
Now, did the state come in later and resurvey all of this?
yeah, they've been subdivided a lot more. I found after 1820 we did the Love survey. In 1827 they expanded the survey, and I found a townhouse that Tyler and them were looking at just east of Deep Creek, and it lays the 50-acre tract out and says including a Cherokee townhouse. I don't know if they've even, has there been, Brett, you know anything about that townhouse? I mean, that's what you find in these records right here.
No, that's the field notes that go along with the survey you're talking about?
The Love survey, just plats. They didn't have. Well, the notes are the Love plats have the field notes in them.
In them, okay.
Yeah. But,
Are they online?
no, they're not online.
Has any of this type of research been done in the Kentucky area where it's a part of the nation?
I don't know. There are probably some people up there doing trail work, but basically, if you're interested in, you can get online. You get David Rumsey's map collection. University of North Carolina has got a great historical map collection. University of Alabama. More universities now. If you're from Oklahoma, they've got you can get on these sites and find historical maps and start doing your own trail research. Okay, it's time to get to